CEO catches his maid giving leftover food to a poor boy. The next day, the truth stuns him. Rahim Malik's life followed a strict rhythm. As a successful CEO, he believed order and discipline were the backbone of success. His home reflected the same philosophy: every item in its place, every routine carried out with precision. He kept rules even in his kitchen: leftovers must be stored neatly, containers counted, and most importantly, food was never to leave the house. He thought this ensured accountability, preventing misuse or waste. His maid, Aisha, was soft-spoken, efficient, and always respectful. She had worked in Rahim's home for several years and had never broken a rule. Every night, she packed the leftovers in containers, labeled them, and placed them neatly in the refrigerator. She followed Rahim's guidelines carefully, never questioning them, though sometimes her eyes softened when she looked at the untouched food. One late evening, Rahim returned from a long board meeting. The house was quiet, and only the faint clinking of dishes came from the kitchen. He removed his coat, hung it neatly, and went to check the refrigerator, as was his habit. He always made sure the system he set was followed. That night, however, something small but unusual caught his eye. One container was missing from the usual stack. He frowned, certain he remembered how many there should be. Instead of asking immediately, Rahim decided to keep an eye on things. As he walked back to his study, his attention was drawn to the security camera monitor mounted on the wall. A flash of movement on the screen made him pause. He zoomed in and saw Aisha slipping out of the service gate with a small bag in her hands. Curiosity stirred inside him, mixed with irritation. Why was she breaking the rule? He continued watching. Outside the gate, a thin boy stood waiting, his clothes a little worn but his posture patient. Aisha handed the bag to him gently. The boy accepted it with both hands, bowing his head in gratitude. He didn't linger or step too close to the house. He simply walked away quickly, clutching the bag. Rahim's jaw tightened. To him, this was a breach of trust. He had made his expectations clear: food was not to leave his home. What if this led to a line of strangers waiting outside? What if it turned unsafe? In his world, a small break in rules could lead to bigger problems. He sat in silence for a while, the image of Aisha and the boy replaying in his mind. That night, Rahim lay awake longer than usual. His father's old words echoed in his mind: discipline builds empires, son. Kindness comes after order. He had built his career following that belief, never bending rules, never allowing emotions to interfere with decisions. But tonight, something unsettled him. The boy's careful distance, the way Aisha's hand lingered in gentle care when passing the bag. It looked less like disobedience and more like compassion. Still, Rahim reminded himself, rules are rules. The next morning, the sun filled the kitchen with light as Aisha moved about quietly, preparing breakfast. Rahim sat at the dining table, watching her. He noticed how calmly she worked, unaware that he had seen everything. Finally, he spoke. Aisha, was there an extra container missing last night? She froze for a second but then turned, her expression open. Yes, sir. I gave it to a boy outside. He comes sometimes. His mother is sick, and they don't have enough to eat. Her voice was calm, almost apologetic, but not defensive. She didn't try to hide or deny it. Rahim's brows furrowed. You know the rule. No food leaves the house. Aisha bowed her head. Yes, sir. I know. I am sorry. I thought the food would only go to waste. The boy, he is polite, and he waits quietly. I just wanted to help. Her words carried no excuses, just a simple truth. For Rahim, that was more unsettling than if she had tried to justify herself. She wasn't careless, she had chosen compassion over rules. He leaned back, his voice steady but firm. Rules exist for a reason. Once you break them, it becomes a habit. And then? Maybe others start showing up at the gate. Maybe one day something worse happens. This is not a small matter. Aisha nodded. I understand, sir. I will accept whatever decision you make. I only thought of the boy. I won't do it again. Her quiet dignity, her willingness to accept consequences without protest, stayed with Rahim after she left the room. He replayed the security clip once more in his office. This time, he noticed something he hadn't before: the boy's body language. The boy hadn't rushed in greed or lingered for more. He kept a respectful distance, as if he understood boundaries. That small detail made Rahim hesitate. He didn't dismiss Aisha. He didn't even scold her further. But something inside him began to stir. The rule had been broken, yes, but had something more important been preserved? The image of the boy holding the bag with gratitude, walking quickly away into the night, pressed on Rahim's thoughts like a question he didn't yet know how to answer. That day at the office, even as meetings filled his schedule, his mind wandered. Numbers and charts blurred, replaced by the thin figure of the boy. Why hadn't the boy begged or pleaded? Why had Aisha risked her job for a single meal? The first crack had appeared in Rahim's rigid wall of certainty. And deep down, though he wouldn't admit it yet, he wanted to know more about the truth behind that simple act of giving. Rahim Malik lived by rules. He was a man who had built his name, his company, and his reputation by believing in order. To him, rules were not just instructions, they were a way of life. He managed his home with the same sharp discipline that he used to run his corporation. In his house, there was a rule for everything: where the coats went, how the books were arranged, even how leftovers were handled in the kitchen. Every container of food had to be stored neatly, labeled, and counted. And above all, food was not to leave the house. He believed this avoided misuse, gossip among staff, and any possible trouble. Aisha, his maid, had been working in his household for years. She was known for her gentle voice, her quiet way of moving around the house, and her deep respect for Rahim's rules. She never argued, never questioned. Every night, she would pack the leftovers carefully in clean containers, stack them neatly, and place them in the fridge as if they were part of a ritual. Her work was steady, reliable, almost invisible, and Rahim trusted that his rules were being followed. One evening, Rahim returned late from a long board meeting. The day had been full of discussions, reports, and hard decisions. He walked into his large, silent home, the air filled with the faint smell of food still lingering from dinner. Removing his coat, he went to check the kitchen. This habit of his had grown stronger with time. He liked confirming that everything was exactly in order. He opened the fridge and scanned the rows of containers. But something did not feel right. One small container was missing from the usual count. Rahim frowned slightly. He remembered very well how many containers there should be. For a man like him, details mattered, and such small changes did not escape his notice. Instead of calling Aisha immediately, Rahim decided to wait. His eyes drifted toward the security camera monitor mounted on the wall of his study. It was something he often glanced at before heading to bed. That night, however, a small movement caught his attention. On the screen, he saw Aisha step out of the service gate, holding a small bag. Rahim leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. He adjusted the camera view. Outside the gate stood a boy, thin, dressed in simple clothes, waiting quietly in the shadows. Aisha handed him the bag with care. The boy accepted it with both hands, bowing his head as if saying thank you. Then he walked away quickly, not lingering, not peeking inside the gate. Rahim's jaw tightened. To him, it looked like a clear act of breaking the rule. He had said many times, no food should leave the house. He worried about the dangers of allowing it. What if this boy returned with others? What if people began waiting outside his home every night? Rules existed to prevent problems before they even started. He turned off the monitor and sat back in his chair, troubled. Aisha had always been trustworthy, always respectful. Why had she chosen to break such a clear rule? He told himself he would deal with it in the morning. But as he lay in bed, the images replayed in his mind. He thought of the boy's posture. The child had not rushed forward or begged. He had waited at a respectful distance, as if he understood invisible boundaries. And Aisha, she had not acted carelessly or in secret. Her movements were calm, almost tender, as she handed him the bag. It was not the action of someone stealing, it was the action of someone giving. Rahim turned in bed, restless. His father's old lessons returned to him: order first, kindness later. Those words had guided him for decades. He had built an empire on discipline, on never bending to emotions. Yet, tonight, he felt unsettled. Something about what he had seen carried more weight than a broken house rule. The next morning, the sunlight filled the kitchen. Aisha moved about quietly, preparing breakfast with her usual care. Her face was calm, giving no hint that she had done anything unusual the night before. Rahim sat at the dining table, his gaze steady on her. Finally, he asked, his voice low but firm, "Aisha, was there a container missing from the fridge last night?" She stopped for just a moment before turning to face him. Her eyes did not avoid his. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "I gave it to a boy outside. He comes sometimes. His mother is ill, and they don't have enough to eat." Rahim's frown deepened. "You know my rule. No food leaves this house." Her voice remained steady. "I know, sir. I am sorry. I thought the food would be wasted otherwise. The boy is polite, and he waits quietly. I just wanted to help." She did not argue, nor did she try to justify further. Her words were simple, honest. She had made a choice, knowing it was against the rule. And now, she was ready to face the consequences. Rahim leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Rules exist for a reason," he said. "Once you break them, it becomes a habit. Then what? Maybe others start coming. Maybe something worse happens. This is not just about food, Aisha. It's about discipline." Aisha lowered her eyes respectfully. "I understand, sir. I will accept whatever you decide. I will not do it again. I only thought of the boy." Her quiet acceptance struck Rahim more than any excuse could have. She was not defensive. She was not afraid. She simply carried the weight of her action with dignity. After she left the room, Rahim walked into his study and replayed the camera footage once more. He watched the boy again, his thin frame, the way he held the bag carefully, the way he kept his distance. There was no greed in his movements, no mischief. Just quiet gratitude. Rahim sat back in his chair, lost in thought. He had been ready to scold Aisha, maybe even dismiss her. But now, hesitation crept in. Was this truly a case of broken trust, or was it something else? Was there a truth behind this simple act that he had not yet understood? The rest of the day at his office, his mind wandered. Even during important meetings, the image of the boy and the missing container lingered in the back of his mind. He thought about how Aisha had not hidden the truth, how she had admitted it without fear. He thought about the boy's politeness, his mother's illness, the way he had walked away without asking for more. For the first time in many years, Rahim felt a small crack in the wall of certainty he had built around himself. The rule had been broken, yes. But had Aisha truly betrayed him, or had she preserved something more important? He didn't have the answer yet. But deep down, he knew he wanted to find out. Morning arrived clear and bright, but Rahim's thoughts felt heavy. He woke before his alarm, stared at the ceiling for a while, and then rose with the same careful rhythm he always kept. He folded the blanket, placed the pillow straight, and walked to the window. The garden looked calm. The lemon tree in the corner caught the early light, and the small fountain made a soft, gentle sound. Everything outside appeared exactly as he liked it, quiet, controlled, and in order. Inside, however, a quiet storm of questions had started to move through his mind. He washed his face, buttoned his shirt, and stepped into the hallway. The house smelled of breakfast, fresh flatbread warming on the pan, tea brewing, and a hint of cardamom. Aisha moved about the kitchen with her usual soft steps. She set the table, checked the stove, and wiped a small water ring on the counter even though most people would not have noticed it. Rahim took his seat at the dining table and watched. She looked peaceful, not tense. She seemed like a person who had slept without worry. It surprised him. Did she know he had seen the camera footage? Perhaps she did. Perhaps she was ready to face whatever came next. He cleared his throat. Aisha. She looked up at once. Yes, sir. Was there a container missing from the refrigerator last night? She paused, not in fear but as if choosing the most honest way to say it. Yes, sir. I gave it to a boy who sometimes waits near the side gate. His mother is not well. They do not have enough to eat. Rahim folded his hands. You know the rule. No food leaves this house. Yes, sir, she said softly. I am sorry. I knew the rule. I only thought the food would be thrown out. I did not want to waste it. He kept his voice steady. This is not only about waste. It is about discipline. When rules bend, they break. If one exception becomes two, where do we stop? Soon there may be people at the gate every night. That is not safe for you or for this home. Aisha lowered her eyes respectfully and did not speak over him. When she did answer, her tone remained calm. I understand, sir. You are right to worry. I will accept whatever you decide. I did not mean to create trouble. I only thought of the boy and his mother. Her words were simple and clear. She did not defend herself with a long story. She did not try to gain sympathy. She accepted the weight of her choice and stood ready for the consequence. Rahim felt a small pull inside his chest, the kind that comes when something true is placed gently in front of you and you cannot ignore it. He looked at her for another moment, then nodded toward the stove. You can serve breakfast. She moved with quiet grace, placing the tea, setting his plate, and standing at a careful distance as she always did. The kitchen wall near the refrigerator held a laminated sheet with bullet points in neat black print, Rahim's kitchen rules. He had written them himself. The sheet had a small magnet at each corner, and there was not a wrinkle on it. As he ate, his eyes rested on the top line. No food leaves the house. It looked as strong as ever, yet it felt different now. Not wrong, but incomplete. After breakfast, he walked to his study. He brought up the previous night's camera clip on his monitor. He watched the small bag in Aisha's hand, the thin boy waiting just beyond the light, the careful exchange, the slight bow of the boy's head. He paused the video and looked closely. The boy's shoes were worn. The bag was held with both hands, steady. The boy's feet never crossed the line of the gate. There was caution in his posture, and also respect. Rahim sat back in his chair and tried to restore his usual inner order. He reached for a notepad and wrote a list: safety, precedent, staff behavior, waste management, reputational risk. These were the reasons he had created his kitchen rule. Each had logic. Each had helped him avoid problems. And yet, as he wrote, another quiet list formed in his mind, uninvited but persistent: hunger, dignity, honesty, trust, purpose. He kept his pen on the page and stared out the window. He remembered his father's words, the ones that had become the music behind all his decisions: order first, kindness later. He had followed that line as faithfully as a drummer follows the beat. But what if, just this once, kindness and order were not enemies? What if they were parts of the same song? He took a deep breath and stood up. He would not act in anger. He would not make a final decision based on one moment, no matter how clear the rule seemed. He would keep the day steady and give himself time to think. He walked back to the kitchen. Aisha was rinsing a spoon. The morning light made the steam from the sink look like silver. Aisha, he said in an even tone, the rule still stands for now. No food leaves the house. I haven't made a decision yet. Continue your work as usual today. She nodded. Yes, sir. If there are leftovers tonight, he added, label them with the time they are cooled and the date. Make the stack easy to count. Yes, sir. There was no tremor in her voice. No pleading. Only acceptance and care. Rahim turned and left for the office. During the drive, his driver pointed out a news billboard about a new city food program. Rahim gave a brief nod but said nothing. The car moved through traffic in smooth lines, and the city passed by in a quiet collage of shops, school gates, and people carrying their morning worries like bags on their shoulders. At a traffic light, he saw a child help an older man lift a crate onto a cart. The small act felt like a whisper against the glass inside Rahim's mind. The office greeted him with familiar demands: emails, numbers, a vendor call about packaging, a meeting about employee wellness. He performed each task with his usual focus, yet part of him was not in the room. He found himself opening the camera clip again during a short break, watching that small moment to see if there was any sign of carelessness. There was none. Near noon, his facilities manager came in with a report on cafeteria operations. Food waste has gone down by 6% this quarter, the manager said, pleased. 6 is good, Rahim replied. But are we tracking temperature logs for leftovers before disposal? Yes, sir. We record cooling times and disposal times. And the containers we use in the cafeteria, are they reusable? Some, sir. We're testing better ones. Good, Rahim said, and then surprised himself with the next question. If we had a safe, documented way to redirect unused, properly cooled food, would our process support that? The manager blinked. Possibly, sir. It would need clear rules. Yes, Rahim answered, almost to himself. Clear rules. After the meeting, he drafted a note in his private journal: kindness that respects process is still order. He stared at the sentence for a long time. Then he closed the journal and returned to his work. Back at home, Aisha kept her day as even as a straight line. She dusted the books in the study, watered the indoor fern near the piano, set fresh towels in the guest bathroom, and adjusted a picture frame that had tilted by the slightest degree. She labeled the soup from lunch with the time and date as instructed and set it on the second shelf of the refrigerator, front and center, countable at a glance. She did not look worried. She did not make any secret calls. She just worked, steady and respectful. In the late afternoon, Rahim phoned home. The call was simple. Everything all right? Yes, sir, Aisha said. Lunch dishes done. Groceries checked. Dinner set for 7. Thank you, he said, and paused. There was a question on his tongue: tell me about the boy, but he did not ask it. He was not ready for more words. He wanted to understand first with his own eyes. When Rahim returned that evening, the house met him with familiar order. A soft glow warmed the entryway. Clean lines, clean floors, clean counters. He checked the refrigerator. The labels looked clear and neat: soup, rice, vegetables. He counted each container. None were missing. There was a small note on the bottom shelf in Aisha's careful handwriting: cooled at 6:15 p.m., safe to reheat. He stepped away from the fridge and looked at the laminated rule sheet again. He could almost hear his own voice from the past, confident and final. A younger version of himself had needed rules to stand like walls. The man he was now still needed them, but he had also learned that walls sometimes need a door. Aisha set the table for dinner. "Would you like anything else, sir?" she asked. "No," he said. "Thank you." She moved to the kitchen doorway and paused, perhaps to say something, then thought better of it and left quietly. Her restraint impressed him. There was strength in her silence. It was not fear. It was respect. Rahim ate slowly. The house felt very still, as if it was waiting for his decision. He put his plate in the sink himself, a rare act, and washed it with quick, careful strokes. The sound of running water filled the room like a soft kind of music. Then he turned off the tap, dried his hands, and returned to the study. He opened his laptop and began to type a formal notice. It started with "Due to a breach of household policy." He read the line twice. He did not like the way it felt. It sounded like a statement he would sign without truly believing it. He saved the draft but did not send it. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He saw the boy again. The respectful distance. The careful hands. The quick, quiet steps. He saw Aisha's face, calm, open, unafraid. He saw the little bag, a simple package that had carried more than food. It had carried a choice, and maybe a message. Rahim opened his eyes and stood up. He was not comfortable making a final decision based only on rules or only on feelings. He needed to see the ground under the story, not just the surface. He checked the time. It was too late to go looking today. But he knew what he would do tomorrow. He would take a small detour on his lunch break. He would pass by the side street near the service gate. He would look, not as a judge, but as a man searching for the truth that stands quietly behind good rules and good hearts. Before he switched off the study light, he looked once more at the laminated sheet on the kitchen wall. He did not take it down. He did not change it. He only stood there for a moment, as if listening to something the words could not say on their own. Then he turned away and walked down the hall. Aisha closed the last cupboard and wiped the counter again, though it was already shining. She turned off the stove and picked up her shawl. As she passed the refrigerator, she glanced at the labels she had made and made sure each container was aligned. She did not know what Rahim's final decision would be. But she knew she had done her work with care, and she knew that, whatever came, she would meet it with the same steady heart. The house settled into night, calm and orderly. Somewhere outside, a scooter hummed past, and then the lane fell quiet again. Rahim stood at the window and watched the moonlight rest on the lemon leaves. He had enforced rules all his life and had been proud of the results. Now, for the first time in a long time, he was curious about something larger than rules. He was curious about the kind of order that can hold kindness without losing its strength. He did not yet have that answer. But he had a plan to search for it. And that plan, simple as it was, brought him a peace he had not expected. Rahim kept his word to himself. The following afternoon, during his lunch break, instead of taking the direct road back to his office after a meeting, he asked the driver to turn toward the side street near his home. The car rolled past familiar shops and crossed a small lane lined with old trees. From the window, Rahim saw people moving about, shopkeepers arranging goods, school children walking in groups, and women bargaining for vegetables at a roadside cart. The rhythm of the street was different from his quiet, controlled home. It had noise, dust, laughter, and struggle all at once. When the car slowed near the corner of the service gate, Rahim spotted the same boy he had seen on the camera. The boy stood in front of a wooden notice board, reading the paper slips pinned on it. His posture was straight, his eyes moving carefully from one slip to another, as if he understood the importance of each word. He looked older in the daylight, perhaps 12 or 13, though his frame was thin and his clothes slightly faded. Rahim asked the driver to stop a little ahead. He stepped out of the car quietly, watching. The boy turned briefly, his expression alert, and then quickly looked down again. Rahim noticed something unusual. The boy did not appear desperate. He was not begging anyone. Instead, he was trying to gather information, as though searching for an opportunity. Nearby, a fruit seller's cart tipped suddenly, sending oranges rolling across the lane. Without hesitation, the boy ran forward, helping gather the fruit. He picked them up quickly and returned them to the crate. The fruit seller smiled, offered him one orange for free, but the boy shook his head politely and stepped back. His pride showed in that small refusal. Rahim's interest deepened. He walked closer. The boy saw him now and recognized him from the big house. He stood very still, his body tense but his eyes respectful. "Good afternoon, sir," the boy said softly, almost in a whisper. Rahim nodded. "What is your name?" "Bilal, sir." "And last night, you were at my gate." The boy lowered his head slightly. "Yes, sir. Auntie Aisha sometimes gives me food. I don't ask for more. She says food should not be wasted." There was honesty in his tone, not excuses. Rahim studied him for a moment. "Do you wait there every night?" "No, sir. Only sometimes. When my mother is sick and cannot cook." Rahim asked, "And your father?" "He passed away 2 years ago, sir. Mama used to sew clothes, but her health is weak now. I try to do small jobs. I also carry food to a neighbor who cannot walk. Auntie Aisha says it is good to share." The words struck Rahim. The boy was not just taking food for himself, he was carrying it forward to others. This was not the picture of carelessness Rahim had imagined. Then, as if remembering something, Bilal reached into a small cloth pouch tied at his waist. He pulled out a black fountain pen, polished though old, with the initials R.M. engraved on it. "Sir," he said, holding it with both hands, "I found this near your gate last night. I did not want to knock so late. I was waiting to return it." Rahim froze. The pen was his father's gift, one of his most personal possessions. He had lost it before dinner yesterday and had assumed it was somewhere inside. To see it now in the hands of this boy was like receiving back a piece of his past. "You found this, and you kept it safe?" Rahim asked. "Yes, sir. It looked important. I thought maybe it belonged to you." Rahim felt something shift inside him. The boy could have sold the pen or simply kept it, but instead he had chosen honesty. That honesty, coming from someone who had so little, weighed more heavily than any polished report Rahim had seen at his office. He wanted to ask more, but Bilal stepped back respectfully. "Sir, I should go now. Mama will be waiting." Rahim nodded slowly. "Go. Thank you for the pen." The boy smiled faintly, almost shyly, and walked away down the narrow lane. Rahim watched him go, feeling strangely moved. Later that evening, Rahim returned home and found himself unable to focus on his usual routines. He poured himself tea but let it sit untouched. His mind replayed Bilal's words: the sick mother, the sewing work, the neighbor who could not walk, and most of all, Aisha's quiet message: food should not be wasted. He decided he needed to see more. So after dinner, instead of going straight to his study, he walked out quietly toward the side street. The air was cooler, the sky dotted with early stars. At the far end of the lane, under a large tree, he noticed a simple arrangement: 2 wooden planks placed on bricks, forming a kind of table. On it sat neat stacks of reusable boxes and a water can. A small group of people stood around, waiting calmly. Aisha was there. She wore her shawl and carried herself with the same quiet grace she showed in his home. With her stood 2 elderly women and a schoolteacher, each helping organize the food. They moved with practiced care, placing labels, checking dates, and handing out boxes in an orderly manner. It was not chaos, it was organized kindness. Rahim stepped closer, unnoticed. He saw Bilal again, this time helping a younger child carry a container safely. He did not rush to the front, instead, he stayed back, making sure others received their share. The teacher explained to a new volunteer how the food must be cooled properly before distribution, how every container should be checked for freshness, and how names were written in a ledger to keep things fair. Aisha had written most of the notes herself in neat handwriting. It struck Rahim that this was not a random act. It was a system built quietly, carefully, with rules as strict as his own, only serving a different purpose. This was not just about charity. It was about dignity, about ensuring that nothing useful was wasted, about giving without turning people into beggars. For a long moment, Rahim stood there, hidden in the shadows, his heart full of thoughts he had never considered before. He had believed kindness could weaken discipline. But here, he saw discipline serving kindness, and the two were not enemies at all. As he turned to walk back home, the night air felt lighter. He knew now that the truth behind Aisha's action was bigger than he had imagined. The boy, the pen, the table under the tree, all of it carried a lesson he was only beginning to understand. Rahim could not stop thinking about what he had seen under the tree. The community table was not a random act of kindness, it was a structured system, with rules, records, and care. It was as disciplined as anything he had ever designed in his own company, only its purpose was different. Where his rules protected profits and order, Aisha's rules protected dignity and people. That night, as he sat in his study, Rahim kept replaying the images. Aisha writing careful notes in the ledger. The elderly women checking containers. The teacher explaining safe cooling times. And Bilal helping the younger children instead of pushing himself forward. It felt strange to him. Here was discipline and compassion working together, something he had once believed impossible. The next morning, Rahim invited Aisha to sit in his study. She entered quietly, a little uncertain, wiping her hands on the edge of her shawl. He gestured for her to take a seat, something he had rarely done. She obeyed, her eyes lowered respectfully. "I saw the table last night," Rahim said calmly. "I saw how you and the others manage it." Aisha's hands tightened slightly in her lap. She looked down, waiting. "You did not just give food away," Rahim continued. "You created a system. You made sure it was safe, recorded, and fair. Why did you never tell me?" Her eyes lifted slowly. "Because, sir, it was not my place. I did not want to disturb you with my small work. I thought you might disapprove." Rahim leaned back, studying her. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since the lockdown, sir," she said softly. "Families near my home were hungry. At first, I shared from my own kitchen. Then neighbors joined. We made rules to keep it clean. Now, once or twice a week, we gather what we can. Nothing is wasted. People eat with respect." Rahim let her words sink in. "And Bilal?" Her face softened. "His mother worked as a tailor. She grew weak after illness. He helps her, helps his neighbor too. He does not beg. He only takes what is given fairly." There was silence between them for a moment. Rahim looked at her, then at the neat files on his desk. For years, he had measured trust by obedience to rules. Now, here was trust shown in another way, through honesty, through dignity, through care for strangers. That evening, Rahim decided to visit the community table again, but this time not as a hidden observer. He asked Aisha to accompany him. She hesitated at first, unsure of his mood, but agreed. Together they walked to the lane. The people there looked surprised to see the CEO in his formal shirt standing under their tree. But Rahim did not look down on them. He watched as food was portioned, as children waited patiently, as records were written in the ledger. He asked the schoolteacher about the process. The teacher showed him the notebook where each donor was listed, where cooling times were marked, where the number of boxes given out was recorded. We learned this from Aisha, the teacher said proudly. She is strict about it. She says kindness without care can be dangerous. Rahim glanced at Aisha. She stood quietly, not boasting, not seeking praise. For the first time, Rahim felt humbled. His own maid had created a system of such value, and he had almost punished her for it. As the food was shared that night, Rahim noticed something that struck him deeply. Nobody pushed, nobody grabbed. Each person waited their turn. Bilal, again, helped carry food to the elderly before taking his own portion. It was not just about filling stomachs, it was about protecting dignity, about making people feel human even in need. Walking back home, Rahim said little. Aisha walked beside him silently, respectful as always. But inside Rahim, a decision was forming. He knew now that his rule no food leaves the house was too small for the truth he had seen. The following morning, Rahim gathered his staff at the house. He announced calmly, from today, leftovers may leave this house but only under certain rules. They must be labeled with cooling times, stored properly, and recorded in a log. And they must go only to a verified community table. No exceptions. The staff looked surprised, but Aisha's eyes shone with quiet gratitude. Later that week, Rahim called his facilities manager at the office. He explained the community table system and proposed something bold: the company cafeteria would create a safe leftovers program. All unused but safe food would be labeled, stored in insulated containers, and delivered to community tables across the city. It would be done with discipline, with records and inspections, just like any company process. At first, the manager hesitated, worried about logistics. But Rahim's voice carried conviction. Kindness with rules is stronger than waste with order, he said firmly. This is how we expand discipline to serve more than ourselves. The plan moved forward. Aisha helped design the household version. The office staff adapted it on a larger scale. Slowly, Rahim's rule transformed from a wall into a bridge. That evening, Rahim sat alone in his study, holding the black fountain pen his father had given him. He turned it in his hand and thought of Bilal's honesty, Aisha's quiet leadership, and the table under the tree. For the first time in years, Rahim felt his father's words grow wider: order first, kindness later now sounded incomplete. He whispered to himself, true order includes kindness. And in that realization, he felt lighter. The world had not grown weaker because he bent one rule. It had grown stronger because he understood it more deeply. The next morning, Rahim woke with a sense of clarity he had not felt in a long time. For years, his world had been about control, rules, and boundaries. Yet now, something inside him had changed. He had realized that rules did not have to limit compassion, they could be the very structure that carried it. He began his day with a simple decision. He called Aisha into the study once more. She entered quietly, unsure what he was about to say. Rahim spoke in his calm but steady voice. Aisha, from today, you will not only manage this home but also help me with something new. I want you to continue your work with the community table, but now, you will do it as part of this household's policy. We will provide support containers, proper storage, and whatever else is needed. Aisha's eyes widened. For a moment, she could not speak. She had expected perhaps forgiveness, but not encouragement. She lowered her head. Thank you, sir. I will do my best. Rahim continued, this is not just charity. It is responsibility. We will keep records, follow safety, and expand carefully. You have shown me that kindness can have rules. I want you to lead this effort. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them. I am honored, sir. That evening, Rahim visited the community table again, but this time he did not stay in the shadows. He stood with Aisha as she explained the rules to volunteers. The people at the table were surprised to see him, the well-dressed CEO of a major company, carrying containers and helping arrange the food. Some whispered, some stared, but Rahim did not mind. He lifted a box, poured water for the waiting children, and served a plate with his own hands. Bilal was there, too. His eyes widened at the sight of Rahim working beside Aisha. He smiled shyly but stayed quiet. When his turn came, Rahim handed him the food himself and said softly, "Take this for your mother. And tell her she is not alone." Bilal nodded, his small face shining with gratitude. Days turned into weeks. At home, Aisha managed the leftover system with precision. Each container was labeled, cooled, and stored in insulated bags for delivery. At the company, Rahim's facilities manager launched the cafeteria program. Soon, hundreds of meals were being redirected to community tables across the city, all tracked with logs and supervised for safety. What had started as one maid breaking a rule became a city-wide initiative led by discipline and compassion together. Rahim felt a change in himself as well. At board meetings, he no longer spoke only of profit margins. He spoke of responsibility, of how a company could use its systems to serve people, not just shareholders. His fellow directors listened with surprise, but also with respect. They saw a man who had grown beyond his own walls. At home, the atmosphere softened too. The rule sheet in the kitchen remained on the wall, but the top line had been replaced. It no longer read, "No food leaves the house." Now, in neat black letters, it read, "No food is wasted." Aisha had written it by hand at Rahim's request, and it became the guiding rule for everyone. One Saturday evening, Rahim joined the community again at the table under the tree. He wore simple clothes that made him blend in. He carried pots from the car, ladled soup into bowls, and even laughed when a child spilled a little on his shoes. The table had grown larger now. More families came, and more volunteers joined. What had once been a secret act of kindness was now a movement of dignity. At one point, Rahim stood still and looked around. He saw Aisha, calm and steady, guiding the volunteers. He saw Bilal, strong and confident, helping carry food to elders. He saw children smiling, people eating together, and neighbors greeting one another with warmth. It was a scene of life, of hope, and of community. And Rahim realized that this was the legacy he wanted: not just wealth, not just buildings with his name, but systems that protected people, systems that built bridges between order and kindness. That night, as he sat with Aisha and Bilal near the table after the crowd had gone, Rahim spoke softly. "I thought rules were enough. I thought kindness weakened them. But I was wrong. Rules without kindness are walls. Rules with kindness are doors. You showed me that." Aisha lowered her eyes, her lips curving in a humble smile. Bilal nodded, holding his small cloth pouch where he still kept Rahim's pen safe as a symbol of trust. For a long moment, they sat quietly together, the evening breeze carrying the scent of food and the sound of distant laughter. The CEO, the maid, and the boy, 3 lives woven together by one simple act of giving. From that day forward, Rahim's story spread quietly through the city. Not in headlines, not in press releases, but in the meals that reached hungry homes, in the dignity restored at a wooden table under a tree, and in the changed heart of a man who had once believed rules and compassion could not live together. And in the silence of his study, when Rahim placed his father's pen back in its box each night, he whispered a new lesson to himself: true order leaves no kindness wasted.